February 22nd, 2024. Athens, Georgia. A crisp winter morning. The sun was rising over the University of Georgia campus. Laken Riley laced up her running shoes. She was 22 years old, a nursing student at Augusta University, a former UGA student. She had a bright smile, a kind heart, a future full of promise. She was a member of the Alpha Chi Omega sorority, a devoted Christian, a daughter, a sister, a friend. That morning, she did something she had done 100 times before. She went for a jog. She ran through the familiar paths near Lake Herrick, the trees, the quiet, the peace of the campus she loved. She never came back. Her roommates started to worry. Connolly Huth checked her phone. No messages, no calls. Laken always texted when she was coming home. But today, there was nothing. Connolly called 911. The search began. Police officers, campus security, friends, strangers. They scoured the woods near Lake Herrick. They called her name. They prayed. They hoped. And then, they found her. Her body was hidden in Oconee Forest Park, near the lake. She had been beaten, strangled, blunt force trauma, asphyxiation, a nursing student, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her, murdered, on a college campus by a stranger. The University of Georgia had not seen a homicide on campus in 20 years, but that record was shattered. The campus went into lockdown. Students were terrified. Parents were frantic. Who killed Laken Riley? Why? And was the killer still out there? The police launched an investigation. They reviewed surveillance footage. They interviewed witnesses. They collected evidence. And then they found him. A man captured on various video cameras around the campus. His name was Jose Antonio Ibarra. He was 26 years old, an undocumented immigrant from Venezuela. He had entered the United States illegally at the U.S.-Mexico border in September 2022, and he had been living in Athens, Georgia, just blocks from the UGA campus. But here is the part that would shake the nation. Jose Ibarra had been arrested before. In September 2023, just 5 months before Laken's murder, he was arrested by the New York City Police Department. The charges? Reckless endangerment of a child, acting in a manner to injure a child. He had been riding a gas-powered moped in Queens with a 5-year-old child on board. He was arrested, he was charged, and then he was released. Released before immigration authorities could issue a detainer. He was free to walk the streets, free to leave New York, free to travel to Georgia, free to kill. On September 28, 2023, just days after his arrest in New York City, Jose Ibarra boarded a flight, a taxpayer-funded humanitarian flight from New York City to Atlanta. He was given a one-way ticket, free of charge. He arrived in Georgia, he settled in Athens, and 5 months later, he found Laken Riley on a running trail. The evidence against Ibarra was overwhelming. Surveillance footage, cell phone data, DNA evidence. He had been stalking the campus. He had been looking for victims. Judge H. Patrick Haggard would later describe the evidence as overwhelming and powerful. Ibarra was charged with 10 counts: malice murder, felony murder, kidnapping, aggravated assault, hindering a 911 call, tampering with evidence, and under Georgia's Peeping Tom law, for allegedly entering a UGA apartment building on the same day as the murder. Ibarra waived his right to a jury trial. He chose to let a judge decide his fate. Judge H. Patrick Haggard, a man who had spent decades on the bench, would hear the case. He would see the evidence, he would hear the testimony, and he would deliver the verdict. The trial began in November 2024. Laken's family sat in the front row. Her father, Jason Riley, her mother, Allison Phillips, her stepfather, John Phillips, her sister, Lauren Phillips, her roommates, Connolly Huth and Sophia Magana. They sat through hours of agonizing testimony. They heard the brutal details of Laken's final minutes. They saw the photographs, the video, the evidence. They watched the man who killed their daughter show no emotion. The prosecution presented their case. They showed the jury and the judge the evidence. Laken's cell phone, her running shoes, her clothing, They showed the surveillance footage, Ibarra on the bus, Ibarra at the apartment building, Ibarra on the running trail. They showed the DNA evidence, Ibarra's DNA found on Laken's body. They showed his cell phone data, his phone moving through the park, his phone near Laken's body, his phone going silent. The evidence was overwhelming, but the most powerful testimony came from Laken's roommate. Connolly Huth took the stand. She was visibly shaken. Her hands were trembling. She told the court about the morning Laken went missing. She told them about the phone call. She told them about the fear, the confusion, the moment she knew something was terribly wrong. She was supposed to come back, Connolly testified. She always came back, but she didn't. The judge listened. He studied the evidence, he weighed the testimony, and on November 20th, 2024, he delivered his verdict. Jose Ibarra was guilty. Guilty on all 10 counts: malice murder, felony murder, kidnapping, aggravated assault, hindering a 911 call, tampering with evidence, everything. The courtroom erupted. Laken's family broke down. Her father, Jason Riley, wept. Her mother, Allison Phillips, sobbed. Their daughter had finally received justice. The sentencing came quickly. The judge looked at Ibarra. He looked at the evidence, and he made a decision. Life in prison, he said, without the possibility of parole. Ibarra showed no emotion. He had no words for the family, no apology, no remorse. He simply stood there, a blank expression on his face, and then he was led away. But the story, it did not end there. Laken Riley's death had already become something much bigger. It had become a political wildfire, a debate about immigration, about border security, about who gets to enter this country, and who pays the price when they do. Days after Laken's murder, a manhunt had been underway for Ibarra. But Ibarra was already on the radar of law enforcement. He had been arrested in New York City just months earlier. He had been charged with reckless endangerment of a child. He had been released, and no one, not the NYPD, not immigration authorities, not the courts, had detained him. If he had been held, Laken Riley might still be alive. The question haunted the nation. How many Jose Ibarras were out there? How many people who entered the country illegally and committed crimes were being released back into the streets? The American people, they demanded answers, and the politicians, they rushed to respond. On September 23, 2024, 1 month before the trial began, President Joe Biden addressed the nation. He announced that the U.S. would not move forward with a plan to protect undocumented immigrants married to U.S. citizens from deportation. The plan was halted. Biden cited the case of Jose Ibarra. He said that the killing of Laken Riley put the administration and the immigration plan in a bad position. He said the administration was trying to manage the immigration problem. He called Laken's murder terrible and sad. And he said there will be changes. But the changes, they did not come fast enough. The debate raged. Some blamed the Biden administration. They said border security was too lax. They said too many people were entering the country without screening. They said the system was broken. Others blamed the broken immigration system itself. They said undocumented immigrants were not inherently dangerous. They said the focus should be on fixing the system, not on blaming entire communities for the actions of one man. But for Laken's family, none of that mattered. Their daughter was dead, and the man who killed her should never have been in the country. The political pressure, it became impossible to ignore. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican from Georgia, seized on the case. She made Laken Riley's murder a rallying cry. She demanded action. She demanded accountability. She brought the case to the floor of the House of Representatives, and she forced the president to answer for it. On March 7, 2024, President Biden delivered his State of the Union address. The House chamber was packed. The cameras were rolling. The president spoke about the economy, about healthcare, about foreign policy. And then he turned to immigration. Today, he said, I'm calling for more border agents, more resources, and more accountability. But then, it happened. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene stood up. She pointed at the president. She shouted, "Laken Riley!" Her voice cut through the chamber. The president paused. He looked at her. He knew what she was doing. She was forcing him to say her name. President Biden leaned into the microphone. "Laken Riley," he said, "an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal." The words hung in the air. The chamber went silent. The president had said it. He had called the killer exactly what he was, an illegal. But the backlash, it was immediate. Immigrant rights advocates were furious. They said the president's language was dehumanizing. They said it was dangerous. They said it was wrong. But the families of victims, they felt differently. They had been saying it for years. The system was broken, and Laken Riley's murder proved it. The debate raged for months, and then Congress acted. A bipartisan coalition of lawmakers, Democrats and Republicans, came together. They drafted a bill that would mandate detention for undocumented immigrants arrested for theft or burglary. It was simple, it was direct, and it was named the Laken Riley Act. The bill passed the House. It passed the Senate. And on January 29th, 2025, President Biden signed it into law. He stood at the resolute desk in the Oval Office. He held the pen. He thought about Laken. He thought about her family. He thought about the millions of Americans who had demanded change, and he signed. The Laken Riley Act became law. It required the Department of Homeland Security to detain any undocumented immigrant arrested for burglary, theft, larceny, or shoplifting. It gave immigration authorities the power to hold people before they could reoffend. It was a direct response to Laken's murder, a direct response to a system that had let Jose Ibarra walk free. Laken's family, they were there. They watched the president sign the bill. They stood in the Oval Office, surrounded by lawmakers and advocates. They had fought for this. They had turned their grief into action. Jason Riley spoke to the press. "This is for Laken," he said. "This is for every family who has suffered because of a broken system. We will never stop fighting. We will never stop honoring her memory." But the fight, it did not end there. The Laken Riley Act, it faced legal challenges. Critics said it was unconstitutional. They said it violated due process. They said it was a form of racial profiling. The courts, they would have to decide. But for now, the law stood. And Jose Ibarra, he was behind bars, where he belonged. Laken Riley's murder, it changed America. It changed the conversation. It changed immigration policy. It changed the way people thought about border security. And it changed the way politicians talked about undocumented immigrants. No longer could they ignore the issue. No longer could they pretend the system was working. The system had failed Laken Riley, and the country would never forget it. The Laken Riley Act, it was just the beginning. Lawmakers introduced more bills. They called for stricter border enforcement. They called for mandatory detention of all undocumented immigrants charged with crimes. They called for deportation of anyone who entered the country illegally and committed a crime. The momentum was unstoppable. The trial, it was over. Jose Ibarra was convicted, sentenced to life, no parole. But the courtroom, it was still heavy. Laken's family, they rose from their seats. They walked to the podium. They had waited months for this moment, the moment to speak directly to the man who killed their daughter. Jason Riley stood at the podium. He looked at Ibarra. He looked at the man who had taken everything from him. His voice was steady, but his eyes were filled with tears. Laken was an amazing daughter, he said. She had so much to give, so much to live for. She was a nursing student. She was going to save lives. And you took her from us. He paused. You took my daughter, he said. You took my best friend. You took the light of my life. And for what? For nothing. Because you wanted to hurt someone. Because you wanted to take something that did not belong to you. Allison Phillips, Laken's mother, stepped forward. She held a photograph of her daughter, a photograph of Laken, smiling, full of life, full of hope. She looked at Ibarra. "I will never forgive you," she said. "I will never understand why you did this. But I promise you this, I will never let Laken be forgotten." Lauren Phillips, Laken's sister, spoke next. She was crying. Her voice was breaking. "You destroyed our family," she said. "You took my sister, my best friend, my role model. I will never get to see her get married. I will never get to be her bridesmaid. I will never get to be an aunt to her children. Because of you." The courtroom was silent. Ibarra showed no emotion. He sat there, still, cold, empty, no remorse, no apology, no words. He had killed a young woman, and he had nothing to say. But the family, they had more to say. Laken's stepfather, John Phillips, spoke. "Laken was a nursing student," he said. "She was going to be a nurse, a healer, a helper. Now, she is gone. And you are going to spend the rest of your life in prison, where you belong." Judge H. Patrick Haggard, he had the final word. He looked at Ibarra. "Mr. Ibarra," he said, "you have been convicted of 10 counts. 10 counts of violence, of cruelty, of murder. You killed a young woman, a nursing student, a daughter, a sister, a woman who had her whole life ahead of her, and you showed no remorse, no regret, no humanity." The judge continued. "The evidence against you was overwhelming. The surveillance footage, the cell phone data, the DNA, all of it pointed to you. And you sat there, silent, empty. You have nothing to say, and I have nothing to give you." He sentenced Ibarra to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. "Mr. Ibarra," the judge said, "you will die in prison. You will never see freedom again. You will never hurt another woman again. And I hope that every day of the rest of your life, you think about Laken Riley." The family, they were relieved, but they were not satisfied. No sentence could bring Laken back. No prison could heal their wounds. But they had done something. They had made sure that Ibarra would never hurt anyone again. They had made sure that justice was served. But the story, it did not end there. The Laken Riley Act, it was signed into law. It was a victory for the family, for the victims, for everyone who had been failed by the system. But it was also a reminder that Laken Riley died, a reminder that her death was preventable, a reminder that the system had failed her. The political debate, it continued. Some said the law went too far. They said it was harsh, unnecessary, cruel. They said it punished people who had not been convicted of crimes. But the families of victims, they disagreed. They said the law was necessary. They said the system had been broken. They said Laken Riley's murder proved it. Laken's family, they became advocates. They traveled the country. They spoke at rallies. They testified before Congress. They told Laken's story. They told the story of a young woman who was killed by a man who should never have been in the country. They told the story of a system that failed her, and they demanded change. President Biden, he signed the Laken Riley Act, but he also faced criticism. Immigrant rights advocates, they were furious. They said the law was racist, unconstitutional, inhumane. They said it targeted undocumented immigrants. They said it treated them like criminals before they had been convicted of anything. The debate, it was just beginning. The Laken Riley Act, it was signed into law, but the debate, it never stopped. Immigrant rights advocates, they challenged the law in court. They said it was unconstitutional. They said it violated due process. They said it was a form of racial profiling. The courts, they would have to decide. But for now, the law stood, and Laken Riley's name became a symbol. A symbol of what? For some, a symbol of a broken immigration system. For others, a symbol of political opportunism. And for her family, a symbol of a daughter they would never see again. Laken's mother, Allison Phillips, spoke to the press. "I don't care about politics," she said. "I care about my daughter." She was a person. She was a human being. She was my child. And she was murdered by someone who should never have been in this country. Her father, Jason Riley, agreed. We didn't ask for this, he said. We didn't ask for our daughter to be killed. We didn't ask for our family to be destroyed. But it happened. And now we have to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. The family, they became advocates for change. They met with lawmakers. They testified before Congress. They told Laken's story over and over again. They told the world what happened to their daughter. They told the world how the system failed her. And they demanded that the system be fixed. But the system, it was not easily fixed. The immigration system in America was broken. It had been broken for decades, and no single law could fix it. But the Laken Riley Act, it was a start to holding people accountable, a start to protecting American citizens, a start to making sure that no family ever had to go through what the Rileys went through. Jose Ibarra, he sits in prison now. He will never walk free again. He will never hurt anyone again. He will spend the rest of his life thinking about what he did, thinking about Laken Riley, thinking about the young woman he killed and the family he destroyed. But Laken's family, they are still grieving. They will never stop missing her. They will never stop loving her. They will never stop fighting for her memory. Jason Riley spoke at a rally. We will never forget Laken, he said. We will never stop fighting for justice. We will never stop fighting for change, because that is what Laken would want, and that is what we owe her. The Laken Riley Act. It is now the law of the land. It has been used to detain undocumented immigrants who have been arrested for theft or burglary. It has been praised by those who want stricter immigration enforcement. It has been criticized by those who believe it goes too far. But one thing is clear: Laken Riley's death changed America. The case, it became a flashpoint in the debate over immigration, a flashpoint in the debate over border security, a flashpoint in the debate over who belongs in America and who does not. Laken Riley, a young woman who just wanted to become a nurse, became the center of a national conversation, a conversation that continues to this day. Her family, they are still fighting. They are still advocating. They are still telling Laken's story. They are still demanding that the system be fixed. Allison Phillips spoke at a press conference. We will never stop, she said. We will never give up. Laken is gone, but her legacy will live on. And we will make sure that her death was not in vain. The political debate, it rages on. Some say the Laken Riley Act is not enough. They want more. They want stricter laws. They want more enforcement. Others say the law is too harsh. They say it punishes people who have not been convicted of crimes. They say it is based on fear, not facts. But Laken's family, they have a simple message. Her name was Laken Riley, they say. She was a nursing student, a daughter, a sister, a friend. She was killed by someone who should never have been in this country, and we will never forget her. The Laken Riley Act, it is a reminder of what happens when the system fails, a reminder of what happens when people fall through the cracks, a reminder of what happens when we do not act, and a reminder that we must do better. Laken Riley's death, it was a tragedy. But it was also a call to action, a call to fix the system, a call to protect American citizens, a call to make sure that no family ever has to go through what the Rileys went through. Laken Riley, she is gone, but she is not forgotten. Her name will live on. Her legacy will live on. And the law that bears her name will continue to protect others. Her family, they are still grieving, but they are also fighting for justice, fighting for change, fighting for Laken. The courthouse, it is empty now. The trial is over. The sentencing is done. Jose Ibarra, he is in prison. But Laken's family, they are still here. They are still standing. They are still fighting. And they will never, ever stop. Because that is what Laken would want. And that is what they owe her. The sun rises over the University of Georgia campus. Students walk to class. They jog along the trails near Lake Herrick. They pass the memorial where Laken Riley died. They pause. They remember. They remember the young woman who wanted to become a nurse. They remember the young woman who was taken too soon. They remember her name, Laken Riley, forever in their hearts, forever in their memory, forever a reminder. Laken Riley's murder, it changed everything. It changed immigration law. It changed the political landscape. It changed the way America thinks about border security. But, most of all, it changed a family. A family that will never be the same. A family that will never stop grieving. A family that will never stop fighting. For Laken. The Laken Riley Act, it is the law, but it is also a promise. A promise to protect. A promise to defend. A promise to make sure that what happened to Laken Riley never happens again. And that promise will be kept, because Laken Riley's family will make sure of it. They will not rest. They will not stop. They will not give up. They will keep fighting until the system is fixed, until justice is served, until every American is safe. Laken Riley, she was a nursing student. She wanted to save lives, and in a way, she did. Her death saved others. Her death changed the law. Her death protected countless Americans. She may be gone, but her legacy will live on, and her name will never be forgotten.